Why vote? How to make your voice heard in a world of broken politics, swamped beneath the tide of fake news, wars on woke, and social media storms life's democracy. Joe Phillips and David Seymour guide the reader through the workings of government and parliament and make a passionate case for the power of democracy. Delighted to say that joining me live on the line is Jo herself. Jo, good morning to you.
Good morning, Giles, and thanks for having me.
Pleasure's all mine. Listen, government is broken. Don't vote, the government will get in. It's all fake news. We're being run by Russian bots, if not Chinese bots. Why should we even bother, Jo?
Well, for all those reasons you've just said, because the biggest single danger to democracy is apathy, in my view. And I mean, the book it's not necessarily aimed at, people who are voting for the first time, sort of 18, 19-year-olds, but it is aimed at the great majority of people who go, oh, they're all the same. It won't make any difference. What's the point? Because when you talk to people, they say, oh, I'm not interested in politics. But then you talk to them and they say, oh, yeah, I'm really worried about housing, cost of living, the environment, transport, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And all of those things are determined by politicians. And if we don't use the vote that we have got a right to get the politicians who are going to make sure that they do what we want them to do, then frankly, we end up with the politicians we deserve. And I think it's really difficult. You touched on the whole thing about fake news, which is a real problem. And we've seen, you've probably seen it as well, the story today that Whitehall sources are saying that Russia, China and Iran were behind some of the sort of the fake news and the social media trolling towards the Princess of Wales, which, arguably led to her having to come out and say that she's being treated for cancer when maybe she'd have preferred to stay private. We know the Russian interference in the 2016 American elections. We know that there's an awful lot of absolute rubbish out there. And one of the problems is that we're swamped with information, but we seem to have lost the ability to discern what's real and what's not. And that's really, really important.
The other thing, of course, is the fact that I'm sitting here, talking to you. I'm sitting here in a studio in Spain, and as a British citizen, I am no longer a European. Now, I came to Spain in '85. I grew up a European.
Yeah,
that was, and I wasn't allowed to vote in the referendum. Therein lies the rub. But
yeah,
if you don't vote, as you said, not only do you get the politicians you deserve, but you get the policies that you deserve. And the apathy with people saying, oh, well, we don't need to vote for Brexit because basically we know we're going to stay in Europe. And then we all woke up one morning and go, what happened there then?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, if you look at the turnout figures, across Europe, for the European Parliament elections in 2019, it's only just over 50%. There's a huge turnout, 88% in Belgium, but in Portugal, it's only 30%. If you look at the figures here in the UK, the number of people voting in the 2019 election between the age of 18 and 34 was 53%. But the over 65s are 77%. Now, it's your future. If you're 30, 40, 50, why are you letting people over 65 determine your future? Because, I know we want everything instantly, and no politician in the world, despite what they promise, is going to be able to wave a magic wand and change things. But I think what we've seen, and you touched on it just now, Giles, with Brexit, if younger people had voted in the same numbers as older people, well, maybe the result would have been different. We could have 3.5 hours on whether a Brexit referendum was a good idea or whether, in fact, David Cameron needed to take any notice of it, or could have said, actually, we've got to have a 10% difference before we take it seriously. But, those days are gone. And we've all woken up to that. We've had Brexit, we've had COVID, we've got war in Ukraine. We've got war in the Middle East. We've got this cyber war going on. We've got huge issues with China and huge issues with Russia, and the sort of global stability is changing. And it's really important, I think, that people do have a say. And I think I mean, I'm a great advocate of lowering the voting age from 18 to 16, because I think if people get into the habit of voting, young people are interested and they do care about their future and they do care about things that are going to affect them. And, you know, life changes. You know, you care about tuition fees when you're 18, 19. You care about the cost of living when you're in your 30s. You care about childcare. You care about social care when you're older and you've got older parents. You know, all of those things change. So the idea of saying to people, oh, well, you don't know enough about it, is absolute cobblers, frankly.
The thing is, like I said, I grew up in the 70s and 80s as well, and we had my voice is cracking with the emotion, and we had politicians. The politicians of grown-ups. We had grown-ups in government, and I know that's a slur maybe on some people, but there were policies that people could get with, and they were for change and reform. I mean, the policies of Thatcher, etc. People voted for them because you could own, for a lot of people, working class people, to own your own council house, etc. To smash the power of the union, so you could set up, this whatever. You may not like it or like it or loathe it, but those were policies that made sense. And as opposed to now, where we're having policies or ideas that there's no ism in it. So, for example, a war on woke isn't the sort of thing to get people's blood pumping. There's no great social change. We're not looking at the NHS or the welfare state, or etc.
No, because all the time you're saying, oh, look, hang on, isn't it disgusting? There's a council over here that's going to have diversity officer. Well, diversity means helping people with all sorts of disabilities to access libraries and sports facilities and, get into work and stuff like that. So all the time you're looking over there and getting angry, and the Daily Mail is running a fury piece, a Twitter storm and all the rest of it. Nobody's asking the serious questions. And you're absolutely right, Giles. If you go, whatever you think of Thatcher, she came in with a very clear vision of a country that she wanted. She had really smart people around her, and she set out doing that. Tony Blair did the same. What we've had over the last 15 years, and you say there's no ism. Well, the one big ism, frankly, is narcissism in the personification of Boris Johnson, who has done more to destroy democracy and faith in the parliamentary procedure. We've had 6 prime ministers in, a few years. The last 2, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, they were actually put in place by less than 1% of the electorate. The Conservative Party members for Liz Truss, and look what that did for us, and Tory MPs for Rishi Sunak. And they're even today talking about another leadership campaign. Well, hang on a minute. This isn't about the Conservative Party or the Labour Party. It should be about the country and our relationship with the rest of the world.
But surely this should also, whilst we're getting distracted about the colour of of a St George cross on the back of a bleeding football football shirt, or look, a small boat coming across the channel, there are insidious inroads being made on things should be getting angry about, like the fact that Home Secretaries have made peaceful protests a problem. It's going to be more difficult. And also, people talk about, young people don't get enough exercise, and yet the cost of living goes up, and meanwhile libraries are being shut, and public sports facilities are being turned over. And these are things that people should be protesting about, getting angry about, and voting about.
Yeah, absolutely. And, obesity is a perfectly good example. We know it's an obesity crisis. It is going to cost the country millions and millions and millions of pounds. At the same time, we've got, I'm going to get people back to work, says the hard-hitting Chancellor. This is the same man who says, it's really hard to live on £100,000 a year. Hello, be connected, for goodness sake, and read the room. So the successive governments, not just this particular one, could have done anything. There's been Jamie Oliver, there's been Henry Dimbleby, there's been Prue Leith, there's, you name it. Any number of celebrity chefs and food experts have said, you could do this, you could change this, change school meals. Give every kid good quality, free school meals. At least they're getting something different and nutritious every day. That would cut costs. It would make people active. It would help the country. We would be more economically active, and we would probably have better mental health. There's all of those. Social care. Everybody says, oh, yeah, we're going to fix it. And nobody does. And you're absolutely right. People should be protesting But, if we talk about protest, I mean, protest is performative. And I'm sure it's terribly, terribly attractive and fun on a lovely sunny day to go and, chuck a can of tomato soup over a picture in the National Gallery.
They don't move. They're quite easy targets, statues and pictures.
Exactly. But meanwhile, if you're blockading the roads in London, you're holding up people like paramedics and teachers and cleaners and security guards and people trying to get to hospital and to work. It's not actually helping. It's much better to vote.
Exactly. And here's my point, you see, because the politics is hard. Politics, as you said before, it's no quick fix. You don't press the button marks. You see, that's me. This is electronic, but you don't tick the box marks, one party or the other. And the next day you wake up and the sun is shining and we have a perfectly functioning world and everybody's got jobs and the whole thing. Politics is incredibly hard and people should go into politics and a lot of them do, I would still hope, for reasons to serve their community and to help their fellow man, woman, whatever you want to call it. And so therefore, it's a long slog and it's compromise and it's thrashing out deals because life is messy and so is politics. But in an age in an age where we want instant hits, then throwing a can of paint or chaining yourself to a bit of roadway to say just stop oil. And we know we have to move away from oil. We know that those are going to live forever. Those sources won't be there forever. But you've got to go about it in a bit more of a grown-up way.
Yeah, well, I have to say that I thought it was absolutely wonderful that the previous Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, who, as you just alluded to, sought to bring in and curtail the right of people to protest. And one of the phrases in the new law was to stop locking on, chaining yourself to railings. Suella Braverman is a woman. She wouldn't have even had the vote had it not been for suffragettes chaining themselves to railings. And you sort of think, what about the people who marched against apartheid? What about the Greenham Common women? What about people who've marched against nuclear weapons, against poverty, unemployment, and so on and so forth? We didn't always do it on social media.
Yeah, but you see, I mean, you mentioned the fact that Suella Braverman is a woman, and for many of us, the jury is still out on that, and I'll get canned for that one. But what I'm saying is that, that piece of legislation has been brought in very much against a certain set of people. Whereas my immediate thought was, I was in London I remember going to London in the 80s, and there was the 24-hour vigil outside the South African Embassy on Trafalgar Square. I was active in the UK in the early 80s, because people look back now in the 80s and think it was all red braces and big mobile phones. But I remember, member of the CND, member and the women at Greenham Common who were there for ages. Again, that wouldn't have happened. So you have to be very careful with the policies that you're bringing in.
Yeah, and, the government has brought in this ridiculous rule that in order to vote in the UK, you've got to take photo ID. Now, that's fine if you're an old person with a bus pass with your photograph on. Sometimes younger people's photo ID hasn't been accepted. Lots of people, for lots of reasons, don't have passports, don't have driving licenses. The Electoral Commission reckons that is about 15,000 people who couldn't vote. They were turned away. But what it does, it dissuades people from voting. And if you start doing that, you begin to manipulate the votes. I'm not saying we're going down the route of Putin, God forbid, at the moment. But you have to watch. And everybody who's talking about free speech and getting crazy about wars on woke and cancel culture, they're not looking at the underlying things where we've had prime ministers lying to Parliament, lying to the Queen, lying to the public time and time again, and they're not held to account. And the other thing is that what we've got is this systematic reward for failure. You don't manage to do anything other than pay your shareholders if you're running a water company, but you're pumping sewage into the sea and the rivers and everything else. Oh, you don't, you might give up your bonus, but you'll move on to another job. You'll move on to another non-executive directorship somewhere because of your mates. And it's up to us to change it. And we can do it. We've got to use the power.
You see, in the States, there's been a big campaign for using your vote. And you've had people coming out saying, go vote. I mean, presumably, mainly on the Democratic, lots of my, I got friends on the East Coast, I got friends on the West Coast, so therefore I don't do those ones in the centre. So, I am that media lovey liberal, as you can probably tell, Joe. But
you and me both.
Yeah, But engage, get your Stormzy's, get your grime artists, get your actors and actors. Say go and use your vote, because if you just go, it ain't going to change, and it's not going to change. And
exactly,
and that is the way that you do attack the fat cats and hit them where it hurts, which is basically in their electoral in their pockets, if you will. So how do you go about writing this in a way that's accessible and understandable?
Basically explaining it, but not in a sort of a school book sort of way, but just to say this is how it works. It's not just about MPs, it's also about local councils. And local councils, actually, I would argue, have a more impact on our daily lives than Westminster government, because it's about the bins, it's about the roads being cleaned, it's about libraries that you referred to. It's about all the sort of things. It's about parking charges. It's about business rates, so on and so forth. So that has a huge impact on our daily lives. So, and I absolutely, just to go back to what you said earlier, most people, I think, go into politics for the right reasons, and particularly at that local level. And across Europe, you've got very powerful and much better system where you've got mayors who've got much more power. We've got a little bit of that in the UK with people like Andy Street and Andy Burnham, and they are doing things, and also they're working together on the nonsense that was HS2 that has now completely unravelled and is HS. I don't know.
That should be the new title for it, by the way. HO. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. The train just leaving. You missed it. So, there's all sorts of system. So the book is basically explaining how politics works, a bit of history, because I think it's quite hard for people to grasp it, unless you're a political geek like me. You sort of think, I don't know what a select committee is. I don't understand what it means when a bill like the Rwanda bill is going backwards and forwards between Parliament and Lords and things like that. So this is how it works. This is your part in it. And it's really just trying to say to people, you've got it. People across the world are still prepared to die for the right to vote. We've got it. We should use it, and we should, you can go and spoil your ballot paper. You can do it by post, but don't just turn your back on something that's so precious.
The book is called Why Vote? How to Make Your Voice Heard in a World of Broken Politics. It's by David Seymour and Joe Phillips, who we're speaking to today. And the book will be available you can order it via our own virtual bookstore. Joe, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a great pleasure speaking to you this morning.
Lovely. I hope to be back with you another day. Thanks.